Denise, thank you for joining me here today to talk a little bit about tax reform and its impact on individuals.
My pleasure.
What are some of the changes that individuals will notice in 2018?
Well, one of the major changes that will affect individuals is the lowering of the tax rates. For example, the 15% tax bracket will be lowered to 12%. The highest tax bracket rate of 39.6% will now be lowered to 37%. Applying a lower tax rate to your taxable income will result in lower tax. However, we need to keep in mind that some of the other tax changes could affect the amount of taxable income.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. One of the major changes for individuals, especially those in high tax states, is the reduction of the deductible portion of their state and local taxes. This amount can only be deducted up to $10,000 now, whereas in the past they were able to deduct 100% of those taxes, which include property taxes and income taxes. It's important to keep in mind, however, that many taxpayers were subject to the Alternative Minimum Tax, or AMT, which effectively eliminated this deduction anyway. But starting in 2018, fewer taxpayers will be subject to AMT because of the increase in the adjusted gross income threshold for that tax.
What other changes will affect individuals?
Well, another major change is the elimination of personal exemptions. So for a family of 4, for example, they will lose $16,200 of exemptions that were previously deducted to arrive at their taxable income. Also, the miscellaneous itemized deductions has been eliminated, and this will not likely affect a lot of taxpayers, but it will impact those who have high employee business expenses and investment expenses that they've been able to deduct in the past.
Have there been any changes to the tax credits for individuals?
There have. One of the major changes that will be really helpful for those who have children under the age of 17 is the enhancement of the child tax credit. The child tax credit will now be worth $2,000 rather than $1,000, and more taxpayers will be eligible for this credit because the threshold has been raised to $400,000 of adjusted gross income.
Denise, what are some of the major takeaways of the tax reform?
Well, a major takeaway of tax reform is that all taxpayers are going to have a different result. As you know, we did a lot of projections in the last few months, and we found that some taxpayers are likely to have a higher tax bill, whereas other taxpayers are likely to have a lower tax bill, depending on their individual situation. Also, we're expecting a lot more taxpayers to take the standard deduction rather than itemizing. And it's important also for those who are over 65 to understand that if they take the standard deduction, they still will get that enhanced deduction for people over 65.
Denise, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you have questions about how tax reform might affect you, please give us a call.